Hey, I'm Geeky Pastimes, and today we're going to be talking all about Battlefield Portal, which was just revealed by EA. This is the mode that Ripple Effect have been working on, the experience in Battlefield 2042 they've been working on. I was lucky enough to be invited to a sort of special preview event where they showed us the trailer you've just seen, and they showed us some extra little bits, and they talked us through quite a lot of it, and we had a chance to ask some questions and things like that. So I'm going to try and give you as much information as I can. I've got pages and pages of notes because I think this mode is so unbelievably cool. Battlefield Portal is so much more than I think anyone really thought this was going to be. They already said there was going to be these free modes, so there was going to be all these free experiences. There was going to be All Out War, which has Conquest and Breakthrough in it, kind of your standard Battlefield stuff. Then there's going to be this Hazard thing, which is something we don't really know much about, but it's a tight squad-based thing, which they're going to talk about in a few months. And then they've got Battlefield Portal as the third one. They originally said it was going to be a love letter to fans, and I think lots of people jumped to the assumption, oh, it's just going to be some old maps and modes coming back, and then you can play it in a new engine. It has that, but then also so much more. To me, this is like Halo Forge version a million. Like, this is taking some of the building blocks of what Halo Forge did, where it let you start creating modes and things like that and share them with the community, and then doing some insane things that you just can't do in Forge. So in this video, I'm going to try and explain as much as I can about why I'm excited about this, what sort of things are possible, and what I'm hoping to see from this, because it is insane.
2 teams and 2 VIPs, but only one way to score. This is VIP Fiesta by Courage. It's the US factions of Battlefield 3 and Bad Company 2, facing off on Arica Harbor with 24 players and random loadouts. Die and you'll redeploy with an all-new loadout. Track down that enemy VIP and make it count.
Position cleared and under control.
Or bring the power of 2042 to Caspian border and take on the forces of 1942. This is Quality versus Quantity by Gabitron. A small squad from 2042 are taking on 32 players from 1942. The future's got the hardware, but the past's got the numbers. Destroy those MCOMs. But do it before your tickets are up. You're not getting them back unless you clear the sector. Not enough memes? Fine. Set up on Orbital for the fight of your lives with Robot Man by Redacted. 20 duck-sized EOD bots, 1 horse-sized T-91. Settle your Battlefield debates on who wins what.
So first of all, what is Battlefield Portal exactly? So it is a service that lets you use a web page, essentially, a form, which means weirdly you don't even need Battlefield 2042. You need it to play the stuff that you make, but you can design stuff without even owning the game if you really want to. And anyway, it lets you use this website in order to create modes based on a set of Battlefield games from the franchise history. So obviously Battlefield 2042, all of that stuff's in there. So you can go in and use all of the specialists from there. You can use all of their special abilities and things like that, the weapons, the maps, the vehicles, all of that stuff from Battlefield 2042 is part of what you can use to create your kind of sandbox type things. Then you've also got stuff from Battlefield 1942, the first game in the franchise. So you've got a load of World War II stuff. All of that stuff is sort of brought up to date in the Frostbite engine. So bear in mind, Battlefield 1942 came out a long time ago. But what they've done is they've actually made it all in the new engine. So there's kind of guns and vehicles and uniforms and maps that you'll recognize. The 2 maps from Battlefield 1942 are Battle of the Bulge and El Alamein. And we'll talk a bit more about the maps later. And then they've kind of updated all of this to work with it. They've also added destruction to the stuff from Battlefield 1942, which is super cool. Then there's some stuff from Battlefield Bad Company 2, which is my personal favorite Battlefield. That's the one I like the most. So I'm really happy they picked that one. So you've got some stuff from Bad Company 2. Again, vehicles, weapons, some of the maps from there. So the maps from Bad Company 2 are Arica Harbor and Valparaiso. You've got both of them in there. Then you've also got stuff from Battlefield 3. So obviously the more modern take on it. So the maps from Battlefield 3 are Caspian Border, which, you know, is a huge fan favorite, and Noshaar Canals. And again, all of the, not all of the vehicles necessarily, but a lot of the vehicles, a lot of the weapons, uniforms, things like that. And so you can use all of those games and then kind of mash them up together in really interesting ways to make new modes. Now, they've said that this isn't going to be something where you need to like host the servers yourself. You're not going to have to pay for hosting or anything like that. This is something where it'll all be done on their cloud service. So you will design a mode and then you can upload it and the community will be able to play on it. You can share the code if you want. So if you want other people just to try your mode, you can do. You can run a server and then like, so you can start up a game and just say, okay, I'm going to select this mode that I created, and then it'll open up, it'll spool up on a server somewhere, I'm guessing, and then other people will be able to join you. You can even share your modes, your creations using a code and let other people, they can't modify the one that you've already created, but they can essentially make a copy of it like you would with like a Google document or something. They can make their own copy and then they can edit that and send it back to you. So you can kind of collaborate on different pieces of this. It sounds absolutely awesome. EA sort of DICE have already said that they're going to kind of curate this a little bit. So there's going to be an element of they'll make their own modes. So I'm imagining, at launch, there's going to be some modes made by them and probably some creators, judging by the video that we saw. And then over time, they will pick things that they really like that other people are doing. And then there'll be a kind of set of playlists where you can see, okay, these are modes that are really popular with the community. And you can just play things that other people have made. Now, the sorts of things that people can make are insane. Like, there's an element of when you start looking at it thinking like, oh, okay, well, this is just going to be like Conquest, but with 1942 versus Battlefield 3. Or this is just going to be Rush, but you're playing on a map from Battlefield 3 and you're using Bad Company weapons and stuff like that. There's so much more to it than that. I think the trailer did a really good job of showing off some of the kind of ridiculous modes. You can have like armies of EOD bots against like a tank or something, or you could have loads of people with defibrillators versus loads of people with knives. But then when they were explaining it to us, it made it very, very clear that there's a lot more you can do with it. It's quite nuanced. There's quite a lot of fine options. So what I'm going to do now is kind of go through some of the really fine details that they went through with us. And try to explain why I think they're important. So first of all, there's 6 new maps that are part of this. And this is alongside the 7 maps from Battlefield 2042. So you've got the Battlefield 2042 maps. They can all be used in this completely. And then there's 6 maps from the other games. So like I said, Caspian Border, No Shark Canal from Battlefield 3, Battle of the Bulge and El Alamein from 1942, and Arica Harbor and Valparaiso from Bad Company. Bad Company 2, sorry. So all of those maps have been created in the new engine. They've said that they've improved the maps because one of the things you can do is you can limit the player count to what there was originally, or even lower or higher if you want, or you can put it up to 128 players. So you can play all of these maps in 128 players. Bear in mind they were designed for 64. That's going to be absolutely insane. And they've said, they've kind of expanded the maps a little bit. And they talked about the idea that these are kind of what they think the original vision for the maps was. But obviously they were hindered by technology back then. Now they can go a lot further. The maps are pretty much like they function the same as they did before, so they haven't added Revolution or anything like that to any of them. But if they had Revolution stuff like Caspian Border with the big antennae falling down, that can still happen in the game. So that all of that stuff still works, which is really cool. Now, if you're choosing one of those maps to go on, if you want to do a mode that's only 4v4, you can actually choose a smaller version of the maps. They've sort of picked some areas of the maps to appear as smaller versions, so you can have a more focused experience if you want to. And you aren't tied down to, like, if you use a Battlefield 3 map, you don't need to then use Battlefield 3 vehicles or anything like that. So you can have a complete mix of vehicle stuff like that. You saw in the trailer how there was like, a World War II plane being sucked up by the tornado. So you can have the 1942 stuff in Battlefield 2042. That's absolutely fine, which that's going to be interesting to see how Battlefield 2042 plays with some of the functionality of the older games. I think that's going to be really, really cool. They've updated, when they talked about updating stuff, they gave a couple of examples. They said, like, for Battle of the Bulge, they added destruction. There's a lot more destruction now, and they actually changed the visuals a little bit because obviously now the engine's so much better. They made it so it looks a lot nicer and is a little bit more atmospheric. For Valparaiso from Bad Company 2, they actually changed it so you can play at low tide because that gives you a lot more land to play with, and that gives you a lot more space, so it works a little bit better for the sort of massive player modes, the huge player counts, if you want that. So altogether, there's going to be 13 maps for this experience at launch, and they did keep saying at launch. They didn't talk at all about what's going to be added to it in future, but they said that they're going to kind of be listening to it, listening to player feedback, listening to what people want, seeing what people create, and then deciding. Obviously, I'm really hoping that they'll add stuff from other Battlefield games like Battlefield 2142. I want Titans. I want to see Titans over, Battlefield 1942 maps. I think that would be absolutely insane. And getting the mechs and stuff, I think that would be really cool. I'd quite like Battlefield Hardline to be included, because then, you get all of the vehicles from that, all the really fun vehicles and the zip lines and stuff. I think that could be really fun, and some of the game modes from that in other maps I think could be really cool. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Like, they're not talking about the future yet. They're just talking about what's happening at launch for this game. And like I said, all of the content from Battlefield 2042 is in it, but also all of the new content that's coming to Battlefield 2042 is going to be in it. So anything that they add, with the seasons, that's going to be straight away put into Battlefield Portal as well, which is really, really cool. They have said, like, there's not going to be all of the vehicles and weapons and things like that, but it's all of the most popular ones. So they've kind of gone through and curated it. So the things that stood out as really unique. So I think that's, basically the idea. If there's like an AK-47 that's essentially the same in like Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3, for example, they don't necessarily need both of those in, but they'll pick and choose the things that people use the most and stuff like that. The idea of it being a web-based platform is really important, and they talked quite a lot about that this isn't something you do in the game. So when you're designing stuff, you don't do that in the game. Instead, you do it all on a website. Now, that's really cool for a few reasons. First of all, if you play the game on console, you don't need to then buy it on PC to be able to edit all this stuff. You can just do it on a website free. You can even do it on like a tablet or a phone. You don't need a PC to be able to do this stuff. So you're going to be able to do this, like, no matter what you're playing Battlefield on, you'll be able to do all of this extra stuff. And you will be able to do it with the last-gen consoles as well, but you won't be able to do stuff with high play accounts, obviously, because those consoles don't have the high play account modes. It's really, one of the big things they said about it being a website is that it's really easy to update it without needing to patch it. So if it was part of the game, every time they wanted to update it, they would have to do a patch for the whole game. And obviously with different platforms, especially like Xbox and PlayStation, apparently that's a pain. It costs a lot of money. It has to be checked and it takes a long time. They don't want any of that. And people who aren't interested in this, they're not going to have loads of patches to their game because of it. So they're kind of very aware that they will probably need to patch it and change things over time. But because it's just on a website, they can do that whenever they want. Like, it's not a problem at all. They said that there's kind of, they took us through a example of them kind of making a mode, but really they were just showing us all of the different settings you could change. And they said, they made a big deal of the fact that none of this is final. There was some placeholder stuff, some placeholder text. So some of these options might not actually be there when you get to play it, and vice versa. There might be new options that I didn't see that they will go through. So first of all, the first sort of part of creating your project, your mode, is to choose the map. So you can choose more than one map. You can choose like kind of a playlist of maps. That's absolutely fine. So you can go through and say, okay, I want these different maps to be part of it. And as I said, you can have smaller versions of the maps or bigger versions of the maps. There's a few different choices for it. And you can, if you want, even with those ones where I said you can have the tiny little versions that have like 4v4 or something like that, you could actually put 128 players on that size map if you really want to. It would be insane, but they were like, yeah, it's possible. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't do it. So there could be some absolutely insane game modes going on those tiny little maps. It would just be chaos, I think. Then you go into mode settings, and in these, I'm sorry, I'm going to be reading from my notes a lot, so I keep looking down. Mode settings, you can do the player count, so you can choose how many players there are, and really interesting, you can have kind of a mismatch. So if you want a mode where you have one person versus loads of people on the other team, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to just tweak it a little bit, so like one side's going to be a bit underpowered, so you give them like 10 more people than the other side, that's absolutely fine. So you can set that up, and then when the server loads it, it will only let that many people join the game. And you can also choose a squad limit. So you can choose how many people can be in each squad. So if you want something where you don't want squads to be in there at all, you just set it to 1. You won't have anyone else in your squad. Or you could do it so the whole thing's in duos or whatever. They did talk about there being free-for-all modes and things like that. So I don't think you need to just have 2 sides. But definitely, like in the options we saw, there was like a slider, which made that a lot more obvious. Then you go into the series. So this is probably one of the biggest limitations I think people will see a problem with, but there are sort of various ways around the problems you'll face. So you have to choose a series for each team. And what I mean by series is what game all of their stuff's going to be based on. So say if you choose one team's going to be 1942 and one team's Bad Company 2. The team that are 1942, they will be able to choose weapons from 1942. They'll also only be able to spawn in vehicles from 1942. Oh, and by the way, you can still, or even people in 1942 will be able to call in vehicles. I'm not sure if they'll get a tablet up or something. Bit strange. But and use the plus system and stuff. That seems to be something that everyone can use. Anyway, so yeah, the 1942 team will only be able to call in vehicles from their era. And then similarly, the Bad Company team will only be able to do that. This means that you can't like have a mix. You can't say on a map, okay, I want all of the vehicles from all of the games on there. You kind of have to pick two by the sounds of it. But as I said, there are ways around it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And it says there, everything from that era will be available to that team, but later on you can turn some stuff off if you want to limit some stuff. You can also turn off specific classes. So they gave an example of a shotguns versus snipers version of the game. And they're saying, okay, well, you can turn off everything except for recon on one team and everything except for engineer on the other team. So if you want to turn off certain squads, certain abilities, that's absolutely fine. Certain types, that's fine. And then you can go through and ban weapons, categories of weapons. You can just say no assault rifles at all. You can ban vehicles, you can ban gadgets, you can ban attachments even. So if you decide there's a certain type of attachment you really don't like, you could just make the game and then not have those in it. So you could, I think a lot of the ideas that were bandied around this were about making a really different game mode, something very extreme. You could actually make something that's very, very focused and something that's only a small change. So say if in Battlefield 2042, it releases and there's one attachment that you think breaks the game. You could literally make Battlefield 2042, just keep everything basically default, and then just take that attachment out. And then you could see how the game plays and play it with your friends and play it with people online. And sort of see, okay, well, this is what it would be like if no one could use that attachment, which I think is a really, really cool idea. If there's some problem with like a certain sniper scope or something, just get rid of it. If grenade launchers are overpowered, just get rid of them. I think that's really, really cool. And that'll be really, really useful for people who want to start up like tournaments or competitive things, that they'll be able to make the rules exactly what they want without having to get people to just agree to it, if you see what I mean. Then once you've gone up from the serious settings, you go into general, and then there's all of these core settings. So here you can change things like, is there friendly fire and how much? You can change things like projectile speed. So you can choose whether you want things to be basically hit scan or whether you want there to be a lot of like time of flight and things like that. You can change things like the weather on the maps, whether you want the weather effects turned on or off, how much damage people do, the headshot multipliers. You can force people to reload whole mags rather than having to, so whether they lose ammo or not when they're reloading, if they reload at the wrong time, which is kind of fun, sort of if you wanted a more realistic mode maybe. You can change aim assist. You can change the strength of aim assist, which again is something I think people really like for the competitive scene, being able to say if they think aim assist is unfair, just turn it off. Like just make it so there's no aim assist at all. You can change those soldier settings, so how much they regenerate health, whether they're allowed to go prone or not, whether they're allowed to ADS, which would be really bizarre if you can have game modes, snipers only, but no one's allowed to ADS, like no scopes only. You can change their speed, their sprint speed, how they respawn, how much they can revive each other. All of that kind of stuff can be edited. Then on the next page, there's the UI settings. So you can choose how much of a UI people get. So you can say, okay, this team doesn't get a compass, but the other team does. Or this team doesn't get a HUD, or no one gets a HUD. Or do they see friendly ID? Can they ping people? Can they use the plus menu? All of those things you can control, not just for one player. And all of these things I've talked about, you can actually choose it per team. So one team could have advantages that the other side don't. Then there's an AI menu. So this is based on the sort of idea of these, AI soldiers that I've talked about for Battlefield 2042, that if you want, and you don't have to use this, if you want, you can make it so it backfills the server. So you come up with a really cool mode, and it's 128 players, but you don't have 128 friends you can get online right now. So what you can do is just fill them all up with AI players, bots essentially. You can fill the whole thing up with them, and then see if the game works, see how the whole thing flows, have some fun. And then as people join the server, they'll just replace the AI players. They'll just kick the AI players off and be replaced with humans, which is really, really cool because it means like these game modes will always be kind of viable to play. And then kind of you can always have the scale that you want. You can also have a set number of AI if you want. So if you want something that's like a PvE experience, so you're like, okay, we're going to have like 2 Battlefield 2042 soldiers against 100 1942 AI soldiers, and we're going to try and do a horde mode type thing where they just keep on respawning in waves. You can do that. Like, that's absolutely fine. And then if you do it like that, then the AI soldiers will never be replaced with human players. Like, human players will always go on one team, and then AI will be on the other team. Or you could say, okay, there's always 5 AI soldiers on each team. And those AI soldiers, if you manage to kill them, you get loads and loads of points. Like, they're the sort of VIPs. And so the human characters all have to go and protect them. That could be a really fun mode. That looks like it would be super easy to create using this. So then there's also, and you can choose their difficulty and things like that if you want. Then there's also a rules editor. Now, this is the big thing. This is the thing I think really blew everyone away. And this is the thing that kind of blew everyone's mind a little bit when they first saw it. This is a full-on logic editor. So if you've ever used, at school, if you ever used like Scratch, where you can make simple games by, it's a visual code editor where so you just choose blocks of code that kind of fit together like a jigsaw. It's that kind of thing. And basically you can put a rule and then conditions and then actions. So you say, if this happens and these conditions are met, then this will happen. That sort of thing. We saw examples of like hundreds of these things, and the people working on it said they haven't seen a limit to these yet. And you could do things like saying, okay, so every time a player dies, they will then spawn in with a random weapon. Or every time a player gets a kill, then they will get all of their health back and they'll get a new random weapon for like a gun game type thing. Or you could do something where like the only way you score points is by killing this specific player with this gun. Things like that, really easy to do. And it seems like there's a huge number of different things you could do. So it's going to be really interesting to play with it. They did say they're going to release documentation on like how to do this sort of stuff. So guides and things like that. But I think there's going to be a huge amount of kind of fiddling, tinkering, working stuff out when this goes live to see what this is really capable of. It seems unbelievably powerful. Now, earlier when I said there were ways around some of the restrictions, this is where you can do it. So if you want 1942 players to all spawn in with 2042 weapons, you can do that using the logic editor. The 942 players won't be able to like pick it as part of their loadout, but then when they spawn in, they'll all be given that gun. So there's ways around the sort of series restrictions by using the logic editor, because the logic editor has access to like every vehicle, every weapon, all of that kind of stuff. Now, there's also, once you've like made all this mode, so the logic editor is like the last part of it. Once you've made this mode, you'll then get a share code if you want. So you can then just do this little text string and you will send that to people and say, okay, if you want to try my mode, here you go. It's as easy as that. You don't need to upload any files or anything like that, or send anyone anything, or have them on your friends list or anything like that. You could just put up. So someone could tweet out an awesome mode that they've made, and then everyone can play it. That's easy. You can also, once you go into the game, you'll see any of the modes that you've created, you'll see them in the options, and then you can just choose them to play them and run a server like that. So it seems like it's super easy to like share all of these things. And with those codes, like I said, someone else can then make a copy of that and then change things that they want to. So say if you want to work collaboratively, you're like, okay, I've made this mode, I want to do this, but I don't quite know how to do it. And then someone else in your community does know how to do it. Then you could say, okay, I'll send it to you. And then they'll make the changes, then send it back to you, then you can make another copy and carry on working. And that sort of thing allows for collaborative work, which should be really, really cool. Now, they've said like all of this is going to be ready at launch, which seems utterly insane to me, but I'm very, very excited. They've obviously already got some people working on these maps. So like in like a little bit of video put up, you've got like Courage has made a map and made a mode on it. Gabitron's made a mode. Someone else has made some crazy mode of EOD bots versus tanks. There's some really, really cool stuff out there. And all of that kind of thing is apparently, ready to go. So it's going to be there straight away. So this is something that on the channel, I'm really excited about. I'm like super excited to get involved in this. I think this could be a really cool thing for communities to make the sort of game modes exactly like they want. It's something that really is missing from like Call of Duty in quite a big way. I think this is going to make Call of Duty look quite limited. And it's something that like there's been loads of success with Halo Forge. Halo Forge has always had a bit more of a focus on the map editor side of it, but the making modes and designing stuff, this seems like a much more powerful version of that. So I'm super excited. And hopefully there'll be some people from the Forge community come over to share some of the ideas, some of the awesome game types they've made over there and see how they work within Battlefield. Now, a couple of other things that they talked about, aside from Battlefield Portal, big one is there's going to be an open beta in September. They're sort of they've promised that it's going to be open. It's going to be in September. That's only just over a month away. So that's when everyone's going to get a chance to play this if they want. Everyone's going to get a chance to play Battlefield 2042. So that is Super exciting. And then obviously at some time, I imagine August or September, we're going to see this last mode, which isn't a battle royale, but is something else. So loads of information there. Thank you for keeping up with that. If you've made it this far in the video, I really, really do appreciate. Let me know in the comments if you made it all the way to the end of this video, because like people watching all the way to the end is a massive deal for content creators. It really does help us in lots of different ways. So thank you so much. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, what sort of modes do you want to create? What sort of things are you planning on doing? Have you got any amazing ideas already? And if you've got any other questions based on, you know, things that maybe they said to us in the Q&A, I'd really appreciate it. Massive thanks to Ripple Effect and EA and DICE for inviting us to, you know, go and speak to the devs and find out about all of this stuff. Really, really cool. And I'll see you soon. Goodbye.